If you work across time zones, borders, and cultures, this is the show for you. This is your host, Leonardo. Welcome back to the International Business Podcast. Today we talk about India. Aarti is an intercultural coach and author. She's the founder of 3A Consulting and has been working in the space of leadership and cultural effectiveness since 2008. She has worked and lived in India, Singapore, and the Philippines. Her first book, How India Works, Making Sense of a Complex Corporate Culture, was published in 2018. The book is a guide to the cultural nuances and complexities of working with Indians. So, let's start from here, with India's unique blend of tradition and modernity. What are the most persistent misconceptions foreign executives have?
So some of the common perceptions are that Indians are conservative, they follow traditions, they're friendly but have a passive leadership style. The reality is that there are many Indias, and India has evolved in different ways over the past couple of decades. People may be dressed conservatively, may lack resources, but often people have that inner spark, and they may surprise you in terms of how progressive and how articulate they are. Another misconception is that foreign executives tend to take people and what they say at face value. I think it's important to accept ambiguity here. It's seldom black and white in India. When you look at startups, I think anywhere in the world, startups are founder driven and they start small. Because of their various variables, they are flexible and agile, and they operate with fewer hierarchical structures, if you will. But once they grow and scale, they need systems, right? They need systems and processes to be efficient and thrive. And this is also the case in India. So the way of working inherently in a startup and the approach may be different. For example, there is greater freedom to express, there is the ability to innovate, and there is comfort to an extent with failure. People are empowered down the line, but usually the founder is actively involved. And even if it's an informal setup, there needs to be a level of accountability and clarity about who is responsible for what. So yes, there is a level of informality in the startup world, but as they operate and as they scale, they do have some elements of hierarchy while retaining the entrepreneurial spirit and quick decision making, etc. Conventional organizations, which are more structured, take longer time to be more agile and break the bureaucracy. This can be driven internally by their senior leaders or by the ecosystem and competition. In startups, many of the founders have a good educational background and have some sort of global exposure which they leverage. In organizations with a conventional top-down approach, there is often less room or relevance for critical thinking skills, whereas startups thrive on finding innovative solutions and creatively thinking out of the box. So this, of course, is a great skill set for managers to leverage. Another observation in terms of startups vis-a-vis conventional organizations is that younger generations look at failure differently. Again, this is worldwide and certainly the case in India. So on one level, failing is seen as a necessary step to success and learning. In some cases, employees admit when they fall short and they're willing to learn. They may even offer suggestions on how internal processes can be improved so that mistakes don't recur. Organization culture, I think, plays a big role in making employees comfortable with failure. So to put it in perspective, in India you have both conventional organizations and startups. Both are thriving, and managers and leaders work with and around both elements of hierarchy and informality.
Highlighting the significance of hierarchy in Indian corporate culture, there is a need for global leaders to adapt their leadership styles to respect this structure, while simultaneously fostering innovation and decentralized decision-making.
Craig Johnson was the principal of the American School of Bombay. He shares an anecdote when workers were building a new school building and it was taking longer than planned. He was worried that the school may not be ready in time, for when admissions would begin. And one day he brought the workers into his room. He spoke a little about them to them. He showed them plans of the school and he shared videos of the kids. He told them, "You are building the most important school in India." Over time, over the next few weeks, his team engaged with the workers in small ways. And that eventually made a big difference to the end result. In the realm of intercultural research, some cultures, like the US, are task based, whereas India is more relationship based. This does not mean that Indians are not task oriented, just that the journey is less linear and it focuses on process, outcomes, systems, but it also focuses on the softer aspects, the relational aspects. Craig recognized this, that it's important to build trust and have a personal connect. And his learning and that of many leaders is that when leaders show trust, people rise to a whole other level. So when we talk of what are some ways of working around the hierarchy, I'd like to say that firstly, hierarchy is not necessarily a bad thing. It can be effectively leveraged. As a boss or a leader, it can be channelized to have more productive discussions, to resolve disagreements, and to, generally just move things along. What works is within the hierarchical framework in an organization or in a team, start empowering people under you. Let people take decisions within limits and support them as they make mistakes. Create a culture where people feel safe to fail or to make mistakes and to talk about it and to share that. Like in the example with Craig, find ways of building trust. If you share the bigger picture with your team and explain their role in the project and how important it is, it does help to enhance their commitment. I think finally it's really about adapting one's leadership style to be more effective in a particular culture or in a cultural context. People have used and do use a participative style of leadership in India, but I think you have to creatively adapt it to make it work. An expat shared how in meetings he would sometimes just be quiet, and that silence will make colleagues uncomfortable and they would start talking. Sometimes people would ask other team members how would they solve a problem without offering any solution or any insights. And then people are then forced to think about the problem and they may actually end up coming up with a great solution. What works or what tends to work is a combination of a participative, empowering style within the hierarchical framework and structure where the boss can make or does make the final call.
Indirect communication is often employed to preserve harmony, necessitating practical strategies that teams can use to navigate this dynamic and ensure alignment on critical business objectives.
India is often a mix of indirect and direct communication styles. Often there's more feedback, more analysis, and sharing of points of view in teams compared to some other Asian countries. But often there are shades of grey. People may speak, they may digress, but they may not speak up given the ingrained values of hierarchy and humility. People may avoid confronting or expressing disagreement or dissent. Another related nuance is about saying yes or not saying no for various reasons. I think some strategies to navigate these are firstly, I think it's important to set expectations upfront. I often tell people when I'm coaching them that don't be very macro initially. Might want to be more hands-on. Be clear about what is expected from everyone, including you. Take the time to explain the big picture and show how all the pieces fit together. Then drill down to what specifically needs to be accomplished and by when. Accountability cannot be assumed. It has to be articulated. It has to be driven. There is, in general, a need to follow up, and implementation is dependent on leaders and their ability to articulate clear, specific, and tangible deliverables. Unfortunately, one needs to oftentimes have frequent check-ins with the team so that you stay on top of the work and its progress. If you're setting timelines, check that these timelines are realistic to begin with. Asking the right questions is a great skill to have. Oftentimes, be ready to coach and mentor more. In terms of coaching your Indian teams to say no, for example, in a respectful manner, or to explain succinctly, what are the specific issues that they are dealing with. I think it's also important to understand what are the realities on the ground. Be flexible to allow people to explore different ways of doing things, but have guardrails to check that the actions or innovation is within the ambit of rules or limits. Don't expect clarity and certainty in general. Things tend to be nebulous, they tend to be ambiguous. Prepare for plan B and plan C is something I always say. Don't assume that everything is fine if you haven't heard otherwise. Check and check again.
If you're looking for more content, join me on Patreon for exclusive perks such as Podcast Archive, access the first 102 episodes, enjoy new exclusive content, early access to upcoming YouTube videos and newsletters, get insights into my content preparation, including a curated reading list and personal reflections. You can also submit your questions and I'll answer them in future episodes. Check the link in the show notes. Aarti has recently published her second book, titled How Women Work, Fitting In and Standing Out in Asia. Published by HarperCollins, the book observes women leaders through a Pan-Asian lens, providing insights on leadership and success in Asia.
While leadership is gender agnostic for the most part, women are often perceived differently in terms of their credibility, performance, and how they communicate. While this is universal, it is certainly prevalent in Asia. So in terms of how women lead or work in Asia, it is across the spectrum. You have some countries like Thailand and the Philippines which have a more progressive culture with many women in organizations. And Japan, on the other hand, has some distance to go. So it was fascinating to speak to almost 60 people across China, Japan, Thailand, Singapore, India, and the Philippines and hear their stories and insights on leadership, culture, and gender. So speaking of some common strategies across these countries, I will talk of 3 here. So firstly, when you look at how these women build credibility, they do a couple of things. They focus on developing expertise. They ask themselves, how can I add value to my work and how can I be a valuable team player? Another thing is preparation. They work really hard and prepare well before meetings or a presentation. Indra Nui, former chairperson of PepsiCo, is a great example of that approach. So all these women leaders, one thing they had in common was that they worked on being visible and vocal, taking charge proactively. The second thing that struck me when I spoke to all of them was their leadership style. So women leaders across Asia, across different countries, are able to balance contrary aspects such as humility and assertiveness, or being vulnerable yet courageous, or showing concern for people and making tough decisions. They know when to be in the balcony and when to be on the dance floor. They can zoom into the operational details and they can zoom out to strategize. So I thought this was quite an amazing skill set to have. And the third point, which is probably related to the second, is that they're able to read the room and work around the cultural code. For example, a Thai manager learned to speak up in meetings. A Japanese banker learned to be succinct in meetings. And over time, to navigate the pulls and pressures, they've developed a thick skin as they've built their resilience and grit. They've learned to fit in and stand out. And that is what led to the subtitle of my book, Fitting In and Standing Out in Asia. My observation of women who succeed in Asia or in some countries in Asia is that they observe and understand the rules of engagement and adapt in a way that feels authentic.
Let's hear a story from Aarti, the transformation of a company's market entry strategy through intercultural training offers valuable insights that can be applied to other regions, demonstrating the impact of cultural understanding on business success.
Let me share an example of an effective collaboration between an Indian team and an American team. These are some things that made it work. So, in the initial meetings, they decided on a broad structure in place. They talk to each other about what does end goal success look like, who is responsible for what, who is doing course correction. There should be clarity on these areas, and they had defined these areas. While broadly speaking, people were empowered to do things their way, their managers knew where they would keep a close watch. So, this of course depends on the team dynamics and the nature of the project. A big area in any of these intercultural collaborations is communication. So, these two teams decided on how they will communicate and how frequently they will communicate. I think both are important. And it's a two-way process with the India person keeping the US colleague posted once or twice a week and the US person also actively responding. So, in general, they agreed on the process and the methodology, but they built in some flexibility in terms of time or in terms of ways of working. If people made mistakes, they wouldn't get shouted at or pulled up. They made sure of that. They didn't let differences become a bone of contention. Before it spiraled out of control, they would pick up the phone and they would talk through an issue. So, they try to avoid escalations. So, in general, the data point that I picked up is, 33% of global projects fail due to miscommunication resulting from a lack of cultural understanding and awareness. So, clearly, IQ and EQ alone isn't enough. When there is both emotional and cultural intelligence, that combination can lead to new levels of collaboration and growth. With intercultural training, I think one of the biggest positives is that organizations learn to streamline their focus areas. They begin to question or they begin to prioritize which areas should we prioritize, what is working, what is not working, and what should we focus on. Often these directions give them a heads up on what's reasonable to expect, and it ends up saving both sides or the organization considerable angst and stress. So, for instance, many readers of my first book, How India Works, shared that the insights on communication were useful, specifically the insights on pitfalls or the nuances on how feedback is given or received in India. They found that helpful. They may not always be a solution in reality, but as an outsider, if you can anticipate and if you know what are some potential problem areas, that awareness itself is very helpful.
Innovative approaches are being developed in advisory roles to help multinationals build inclusion while respecting and preserving local cultural identities, ensuring harmonious integration of global and local values.
On a macro level, multinationals have to align with global values and ways of working. The what is usually done as per global guidance, but how it is executed can be aligned to local ways of working. I think in general, it's good to have local teams follow the structure and plans, but build in some flexibility and bring in some local flavor. For example, if you talk of recruitment, while we do understand that things look different in different places, for example, what is assertive in Asia probably looks different from what is assertive in other places. But that doesn't mean that people don't have the fire or drive. It just looks different. So when one is hiring people in a local country office, weighing on local resources or HR is important. Another aspect is, about building trust, which really is the cornerstone of intercultural relations, and companies are paying attention to this. I see increasingly a lot of people organizing events, talks, annual day meets, festival celebrations. All of these are good forums and good touch points for foreigners to build that sense of connect with their employees, with their customers. I have been seeing how CEOs share pictures of these events on social media, and that makes employees feel good about their work and its impact. It really is about creating inclusive cultures, and I do see companies again investing in training programs to sensitize employees about unconscious biases and promote things like allyship. One example is LGBTQ. There is greater awareness and acceptance of these programs within Indian organizations. I've seen some MNCs and large Indian companies, have created a lot of safe spaces for them. And it's amazing to see how attitudes are evolving on these socio-cultural subjects. When leaders convey respect and support, this culture cascades down and it enables people to feel empowered and to feel valued.
You can find more details about each guest in the show notes. I'd like to remind you about Patreon, where you can gain in-depth access to the show. If you enjoyed this episode, please follow the show on your favorite app and leave us a review. Connect with me on LinkedIn, link in the show notes. Cheers for now.
The world is stuck in a hard place. They are stuck in a split between the two world's great superpowers, the United States and China.
What you might call multi-domestic strategy, which means that they customize the products, they customize the marketing strategies.
And they would all say, Thompson, musukashi, very difficult to do. I don't know,